Oh, it's recording. Okay, we're back at another podcast episode. Um, I thought about
What,
this the other day. What's that? What?
what's the title of our podcast?
I thought of something funny earlier. I thought I'm not sure what our podcast would be, but um, I thought since there's an LSAT demon, we could make a program called LSAT Angels and make it a competitor.
I
But
thought it too, or I thought. Remember, I always bring this up like every conversation, no. But like, you know, when you're the angel and I'm the demon, maybe we do angel and demon,
yeah, Angel and Demon.
or whatever.
You're the meanie. All right. So I think the main purpose of today is just to answer some of these questions that people posted, which will be fine. It'll be a good discussion. So the first one, definitely one we haven't talked about at all yet, is are there any do's and don'ts with letters of recommendation?
Hmm. I mean, I'm not an expert on letters of recommendation, but I mean, the letter of recommendation should obviously positive and about you, and it's giving some level of detail about positive things about you. So,
Sure.
um, I mean, I think John Richardson did a podcast thing or whatever with Anne Levine recently, and she was talking about do's and don'ts of applications. I think John also made some good points about what to do. People should watch that maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just in general, um, you know, find somebody that knows about you that you're very sure is going to write something positive. Um, Maybe have them look at your personal statement first. I mean, they don't have to, but you might want to do that so that it's not like the exact same stuff they're talking about, but they probably wouldn't be anyway if you're writing a personal statement that's like personal to you and stuff that they probably don't
Sure.
know about. So I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean, the only thing I was gonna say, of course, kind of two things is that the first one, like you already said, um, believe it or not, people will, which I still don't really get why this is a thing. I guess I do, but I really don't. People will write bad letters of recommendation, like purposely negative ones. And I guess my viewpoint, if someone asked me to do that, I would just tell them no because I don't want to be like, my goal is not to impede their future, you know. But I mean, the point is, people will do that, and so just make sure that whoever you're asking, you do have a solid relationship, and if there are any gaps in that relationship, that you make sure like the person's cool with it, everything is settled, there's no extrinsic problems. The only thing I've heard about letters of recommendation is that you do want them to be from credible sources. Um, I've had students ask me to write their letters of recommendation. I am not a credible source. Um, and for that caliber of application, I'm just your LSAT tutor, which is they don't care anything about. In general, the general rule of thumb, it seems to be, is that the two main streams of people you want to pull from are academic resources and employer resources. With in my understanding, there's a slight favoritism or preference for the academics for a lot of people, assuming you're just out of college or you're a few years out. If not, though, employers are fine. But you want people that you've worked under or for that can attest to your ability as a person, your character, and your work ethic and that kind of thing.
Or people you work over, but most people don't work over people, I guess. Not.
Yeah, I've never even. Have you seen letters rec that like of like, I guess, subordinates like writing letters rec as you as a boss?
No, I guess it would be a little bit weird because it'd be like a power imbalance. Like, oh, you're going to write this good letter, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there'd be like some bias.
But but I could imagine doing it if in the right circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, but in general, I would say professors and or your boss of whatever work you do are the preferences. And then, I know most schools require a minimum of two. It's certainly not going to hurt to have a few extra if you have them. If not, it's not the end of the world. But if you do, that's not going to be a bad thing to have more people speaking highly of you. So.
And when we do our LSAT angel and demon thing, I'm going to have my demon ones.
Oh my gosh, you could get a perm like that, and then there you go.
I think that's how it works.
Awesome. And so that's kind of that question. This is a really good question. I think you'll have a lot of good thoughts on. So according to our perspective or your perspective, why is the LSAT so difficult for most people? And what are the main reasons that make it hard to study for the LSAT? Kind of a good question.
Yeah. I mean, what's hard about the LSAT? Nothing. I mean, no, everything's hard about the LSAT. I mean, uh, but I guess when it's not hard, why is it not hard? It's because you either have a lot of exposure to the material on it, or a lot of exposure, maybe less, but a lot of analysis of it. So it's some kind of combination between exposure and analysis. You got to have both, some of both. And so, why is it so hard to walk? Why does it take a couple years to learn how to walk? Because it's complicated. That's why. And so you got to learn it, and you got to put in the time. And a lot of people it's not that hard to take the LSAT. You could take it tomorrow. Like you just need 3 hours, and like, you don't even need to put any answers. You could get a 120 with just no answers. It's not hard to take the LSAT. It's hard to do well on the LSAT, especially for some people who have not been on a path for decades preparing them to do well on the LSAT. I mean, if you're trying to do very well on the LSAT, get a 170, but you grew up in a school where most of the kids couldn't read in high school or something like that, or not advanced things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, probably they couldn't read because they weren't being taught well, which means you probably weren't being taught well either. So now you're trying to make up for decades in months, if that's the goal you set, or something like that.
Yeah.
In some sense. So, which is not impossible, actually. You can do that theoretically, maybe, if you have very good instruction and like really catch up well. But so that's what makes it hard to get a high score on the LSAT for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, in my perspective, there's kind of two immediate things that come to mind. The first one, obviously, is that for a lot of people, it is a language barrier. It's very, very much a test of how well do you know the English language and its nuances, in terms of vocabulary and just quantitative meaning and that kind of thing. And so, for a lot of people, even honestly, English as first language people, like a lot of these things, like how many is closer to some than it is to most, so just little just nuances like that, right? That's not obvious, and in everyday language, if I said the word many, you would assume that's a lot of things, right? But the concept of many is kind of relative and just based on kind of opinion as well. And so just those little tiny nuances are not obvious.
Because if I said I had many of my fingers chopped off, that's maybe only a couple.
It could be, yeah, which is, you could say as many, or significant, like what is significant, what defines significant. So it's just, again, there's a lot of nuances like down the test. The other thing I would say is just that as much as the English thing isn't intuitive for a lot of people, neither is the critical thinking and the logic that you get tested on. The most obvious example, I think, for a lot of people, not everyone, but for a lot of people, I just think logic games don't come naturally for everyone because you've never really learned anything so close like that before. And so just stuff like that. It's just, it's not, it's funny because in a way it is normal everyday things you learn on the test, but in another way it's not. It's certainly not intuitive. And so I think just, it's a hard test. Like, it's definitely like, I don't care if you score 180 or 120. It's not an easy test at all. It's difficult. It's learnable, and it's definitely achievable to do well on it. But I think just, and this is going into a different topic kind of, but I think people really, really underestimate how difficult the test is, and so it's brutal. It's hard. It's not easy at all.
Especially when people think, recently some people were posting in the group like this meme about like reading and then like, what did I just read? Like,
yeah, I know that. Yeah.
I like that one. But like, this is an LSAT thing. I guess I can't think of a question where they do this, but I'm sure there's a couple dozen where they do it.
Sure.
Is reading the same as reading? Okay, is all types of reading the same? Well, if you can read, can you do this kind of reading? Well, why would you be able to do a different kind of reading? What if different kinds of reading exist? And what if this is the kind of reading that you don't know how to do? Because you know how to read, but this is not, you could call this reading, but it's not the same thing. So not to get a 180, you're not doing the same things that you're doing when you read a menu. Okay, that's not
exactly, yeah.
So don't expect that because you know how to read one way that you can read like this. You might be expecting that because they call it reading comprehension. Oh, it's the word reading. It's the same thing. No, not at all. Not at all the same thing. I mean, of course, it is somewhat the same thing. There's letters and there's stuff like that, but a lot of different skills being used here that
Yeah.
don't
Well, I
coming out.
think, yeah, I think I can't remember where it got posted. It was either on Facebook or somewhere else, or someone messaged me and asked me or something. But someone asked recently, what kind of mindset do you need to have in reading comp? And my answer was the exact same one you have for logical reasoning, or at least similar to logical reasoning. Like reading comp is not any less critical. It's not any less logical. It may seem like that because it's reading comp and not logical reasoning, but you have to kind of keep your logical reasoning brain on, and there's still going to be nuances. There's still going to be evidence. There's still not going to be evidence for all of them. And so it's the exact same thing, although it doesn't seem like it. Um, and so that was just one point that I kind of thought about too. And yeah, like you said earlier, this happens every now and then. It's pretty often where, I'll be in a session, I'll say, and a student will be trying to defend an answer. I'm like, well, yes, in the real world, if I was having a regular non-LSAT conversation with you, I would totally believe you. That would make a lot of sense. But logically, you can't prove it. It's stuff like that, right? And so like it goes back to like this kind of language thing where it's like words we use in everyday life so kind of carelessly or kind of just throw them around. They have real meanings, and those real meanings matter on the test versus in regular conversation. They're not as important that I use the right word,
Yeah. Two
so
things about um, don't I wouldn't. Some students I'm sure are going to say, "Oh, see, the LSAT is not like real life. It's just nonsense." No, it's not like real life because most people aren't lawyers. But in terms of lawyers, it is like real life. If you use the wrong word, your point fails. If you use the right word, your point succeeds.
right.
If you use the right word, you've perjured yourself. Yeah, wrong word, you've perjured yourself. You use the right word, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. And uh, I think John Richardson, he's the guy that runs the Facebook group. He also posted a video, not recent, maybe like a couple months ago, about how some class, I don't know what it was. It looked like it was a courtroom or something. I can't remember. They were debating on like what the word is means or something like that. And it's like, these are things that actually happen because becoming a lawyer is basically making verbal arguments, and your verbal skills matter.
Sure.
And the other thing is, when I started teaching the LSAT, before I learned anything of it, so I studied for the LSAT, went to law school, passed law, got through law school, did a non-law business, had nothing to do with the law really, although it had a lot to do with the law, as every business does nowadays. But then I did that for like 5 years. Then I went to study for the bar, passed the bar. Then I started teaching people for the bar. And then I started teaching people the LSAT. Before I started teaching people, right before I started teaching the LSAT, I wanted to take the LSAT to see what does a lawyer do? What can a lawyer do with the LSAT with no study? Given the fact that we've already done all the studying that we've done. And I got a near perfect score on LR, near perfect on reading comp. Logic games was about, I think I only got like a third of those right or something. I didn't have time to get to all that stuff.
Sure.
So like, if you already have been through law school and know how to read critically and all these skills, you really don't need any strategy for the LSAT. It's already in you. But since you haven't been to law school, if you're taking the LSAT, probably, then you need guidelines and strategies and stuff to hone your thinking and to make sure you stay on the right track. And so, yeah, you need to learn those because
Yeah.
those are the kinds of thoughts that you're expected to have essentially when you're a lawyer and stuff like that.
Absolutely. 100%. Good. Cool. Love it. Good question. So again, I think that just kind of caps the whole question. That's probably the main reasons why it's difficult. Nuances in language was a big one, and critical thinking. It's a skill people have to learn. So yeah. Cool. This is definitely a topic we haven't hit either. I don't think we've talked about it. Or whether, well, let me just phrase the question first. So the first question says, how do you identify when you would be using scenarios or scenes on logic games more quickly and accurately, which we haven't really talked about that as a method or a strategy and the concepts behind that at all ever. So
No. Well, we've talked about it maybe on Facebook now and then. I
we have not personally chatted about it like right now though.
right. Yeah, of course. And so, but as far as I can tell, your strategy is like do logic, you do scenarios, worlds, whatever, hypotheticals, if you like, if it helps you, but also be able to do the games without them, or
Mm-hmm.
especially since some games is very hard or impossible to figure out what the scenarios would be, what the hypothetical worlds would
Sure.
be. And so is that your position basically on it?
It's basically, yeah, basically, it's basically like if you, so part of it kind of depends on the student a little bit, but in general, and kind of the way I do it is if there are two, maybe three, but usually just two very clear cut worlds with a domino effect on one of them, and like it makes a lot of sense to make worlds and you can see it, that's great. Um, I'm not about making three or four, probably usually maybe more than three. I'm not about making four scenarios or like that. And I'm definitely not about if you're on the actual test, I would not sit there trying to figure out the scenario if it doesn't really come to you intuitively.
Sure.
Um, and then,
Yeah,
yeah, the other thing too is like, yeah, like some games, like whether they literally have scenarios. I mean, I guess every game technically has scenarios. But in terms of like understandable worlds, um, I feel like most games don't have two or three clear cut worlds of distinction. So a lot of times I'll get students from a certain program that teaches worlds a lot, and I will do a game with them, and they can't. If the question just says which one of the following must be true, they don't know how to do it.
right. Yeah.
It's stuff like that. And so I want people to know how to do the games without worlds, because if there's no worlds, that's yes, you know how to do the questions. Or if you go on the test and the game has worlds, but you can't identify them, how are you going to handle that? So I want them to have that plan of action. Though I don't disagree. I mean, I do think worlds is a good strategy if you use it correctly, I
Right.
guess. So
So personally, I think that everything you said is pretty good. I think um, obviously there's people that do very well on logic games that never use worlds. So straight into the questions or whatever, stuff like that.
sure.
But I found in my experience that that's not the norm. Now, I'm somewhat biased because I don't do that. So maybe I know for sure that I haven't practiced that enough to be able to do it superbly.
You
Um,
don't do worlds?
no, sorry, I haven't practiced not doing
I
worlds
see. Okay. I got you. Okay.
well enough to be excellent at it. When I have but that's because I've practiced worlds a lot so that I can actually, so more things are intuitive and I know how to
Sure.
make worlds think. So it's like a trade-off. You can specialize in either way, but you'll get better either way you do it. Making worlds, not making worlds, sometimes making worlds, whatever. But I think, and I'm not sure that this is true, but I think that for the average person, specializing in making worlds would be paying off more. But yeah, you do have to. You can't be freezing up when you find something that you can't make worlds about, because
Sure.
you'll, no matter how good you are, you'll find a game that I don't know what worlds would I make? It would be like 100 worlds or whatever, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. So, but I will say also that since I've been tutoring for last couple of years, I've gotten better. It's almost happened without effort, really. I look at games where I couldn't make worlds before, and I know immediately how to make the worlds and in a way that makes sense. Also, I regularly do 3, 4, 5 worlds. I don't have any problem with that. But yeah, if it gets more than that, more than 6, I mean, then
Sure.
there's some other considerations about whether you should do it or whether you should not. But yeah, you can also like work on it so that instead of making 6, you capture everything in 2, or different things like that. There's techniques that you can use. But anyway,
Yeah, no, it's definitely just different perspectives. I mean, I guess like to answer, well, then I guess let me ask you this then, because then the question specifically that this person asks is how do you identify when you make them? Is that just something that you kind of just learn by doing a lot of games? Is there like a trick? Is it like a gimmick? Is it a certain characteristic of a rule?
Sure.
Um,
Well, there's definitely people see certain roles and they're like, oh, a role with only two options. That means there's two worlds. And you
right,
could do it won't necessarily be helpful. But
exactly.
um, but so I don't think it's like a trick really. Basically, my orientation is even if I feel like I don't want to make worlds, I'm gonna try to make worlds because everything's so much easier for me when I do it. And only when I really can't do it do I give up on it. And so I would say the default for me is I'm gonna make worlds every time, unless they force me not to.
Sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
I guess my default then is, um, which is a little bit, it's kind of tricky because it's like, I want the default to be if you don't see a world. I guess the biggest problem, I guess I'll phrase like the biggest problem I see is when someone comes in and they spend like 2 minutes trying to build the world and it's like they can't finish the questions anyway. And it's like, well, you could have spent those 2 minutes on the questions and just tested it out. And then you would have had a world right there you could have used. And you would have had another world if you just plugged in B real quick. And then like they would have actually been productive worlds. Um, as opposed to making two roles that could or could not be productive. But the thing is, like at the same time, I will once I know people are comfortable doing it without worlds, then I do start teaching them worlds if I can, because it's like if you can identify them, then it's like why would you not do them? Because they do save you time, you know. But I want them to start learning how to do it efficiently and quickly. And I still want them to have that backup plan as well, to where if they can't identify the world for some reason, or if there just isn't a world, like you said, if it forces you to not make one, make sure you can handle it and not be freaking out or be calm. Like, can you be calm and confident? I think a lot of that for me also depends on when am I taking on the student and when is their test,
Right.
right? Because I mean, if I have a month with them, like, and they don't know any worlds at all, like I can show them, but I feel to get personally comfortable with like the really deeply comfortable with worlds, it takes a lot of practice, you know. And that may not be priority one, more so just making sure you get the questions and get them right and that kind of thing. So
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have to do a lot of things with students who are not giving themselves like adequate time to prepare.
Yeah, so there's a lot of sacrifice that we made. But then, like I said, though, on the flip side, if someone comes to me and they have like 8 months and be like, oh my gosh, well, first off, let me just get you like let me make sure you can solve a must be true question without the worlds. But then, hey, check out this concept. We could have done this, and we would have gotten the question like that. You know, and it's like start introducing that, and then from there, it's like, okay, I'm gonna start holding you to that standard. Can you start identifying these little inferences and these little connections, because that's gonna help you so much. You know. So it kind of depends on the student whether or not I kind of really dive into worlds or not. But no matter what, of course, I think you would agree. You definitely want to know how to do questions without them, just in case you need to. So it doesn't kind of shock your system on test day if that comes about.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Awesome. Love it. Um, Interesting. So this is a cool question. I think this is a. So the question is 1 to 2 weeks from test day. What do you do? Do you keep studying overall? Do you focus on just one area? Do you take a break and not study? Um, it's actually a really common question I get from students. Like, what do you do in the weeks leading up to the test? Do you study more? Do you study less? Should I take more practice tests?
Did we answer this last time?
I don't remember. We may have, but not. I guess what we focused on last time. I think we did. But I think our focus was more on. I don't remember what I said last time.
Okay.
This question's interesting though. The one thing this person asked that I think is interesting is, do you keep studying overall or do you just focus on one area? I've recommended both at different times. I think the general answer that I would give most of the time is keep studying overall. Sorry. I think the only time I would recommend studying one area is if that area is a big anchor in your score, or for some reason you're really cramming for this test and you don't even have time to learn reading comp and all you know is LR in games, and it's like, okay, well then honestly at this point you're actually going to get a better score increase from polishing up your games in LR than you would by trying to start into reading comp, since that takes such a long time or a longer time to get good at, you know. Overall though, if I was this person, I would be studying overall. I would not be focusing on one area. In terms of taking a break, I'm not sure if I would take a clear-cut break unless I was really burnt out, but I would be tapering my studies down toward test day. So I'm studying gradually less and less until the day before the test. Um, so I'm not like super fatigued or exhausted on test day. Basically, my brain's ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, in the last couple of weeks, um, realistically, you're probably not going to learn that much.
No,
So the the uh, the priority is avoiding collapse of what you already know and can do.
exactly.
So already would be, and how can you cause a collapse? Fatigue, collapse during test day, fatigue, anxiety,
Yes,
lack of practice. Like if you just stop doing logic games for a couple weeks.
that's not gonna
Um,
be good. No.
so those things are the things we want to avoid. So probably overall, just keep working and everything so that you don't stop working on one thing. And unless one thing you're very solid at and you know you can pick it up without looking at it for 2 weeks and you can still do it.
Right.
But and uh, and you also want to avoid overworking yourself, over analyzing things, stuff like that, so that you can avoid fatigue and
Yeah.
anxiety, I guess.
When do you usually tell people? I'm not sure if you get. I'm sure you get this question a lot. Um, and I'm sure it depends, but when like should the last practice test be in
I've worked,
general?
I've worked with people in sessions the night before their tests.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
I've seen other people take 5 days off before their test or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I think it depends on the person and what they can, how quickly they can learn, how beneficial are those last hours going to be, how anxiety prone are they, stuff like this. If they do worse, if they do badly in the session the night before, are they going to get super anxious about the test because they did bad on one evening or something like that, or something that maybe they did fine, but they're going to interpret it as bad. So then they're going to get super
Well,
anxious.
that's the thing too. Which is kind of I mean, a session the night before the test, that's fine because the session will be framed in a way that that's kind of encouraging and just going over light stuff, nothing too crazy, nothing too brainwashing or anything like that. But a practice test the day before makes me nervous because just like you said, even if that person does good, it's just like it's for me, it's not worth the risk of them either A doing bad on that one test or B doing good but interpreting as bad and psychologically that messes with them on test day. It's like I don't want anything near the test messing with your head. I want you going and feeling good. Nothing's going to freak you out. Nothing bad to trip you up. Because if you take a test, I mean, for maybe not for me and you, but I can imagine if a lot of people take a test before their real test and they do poorly, then it's like the day before, that's going to freak them out. And it's like, I don't want you being in that mindset, right? So my in general recommendation, if I was just telling this person, a blanket statement, I would say that probably 3, 4, or 5 days out should be your last practice test. The last 2 days, you're just doing some light setting, maybe some sections, maybe just some drills, whatever you want to do overall. But the last test, full practice test, I would say a few days out. Just to
Sounds
give
good.
them some time to get a good score so they kind of see where they're at, what they need to work on in the last 2 days. But then also so it's not right before, so their head is, even if they did bad on Wednesday, by the time Monday comes around, the effects of that bad test aren't as strong as they would be the night before.
Although there's something on the opposite side, which is like, if you know they're going to go into their test, do poorly because they're not at an advanced level yet. And when they start doing poorly, they're going to freak out because they expected something other than that. Maybe it would be good to do a test the day before or whatever and
Well,
say,
I'm
where you're
talking about people.
different, you know?
No, I'm talking about people that do like well, but every now and then, like every like 6 practice tests, they'll do like a little bit worse in their goal score or something like that, and that kind of like people that are really paranoid like that. I'm talking like if someone's doing poorly on their test and they kind of like we both kind of know they're gonna go in doing poorly, then it's like, I mean, I still want to take a practice test the night before just because I mean you can take one a few days out, but I'm not worried about them getting a bad score and being discouraged because they're already. That sounds brutal, but they kind of already are, and we need to do some fixing after the test. I'm talking about more of someone like, okay, my goal is a 160, and I'm usually getting 162, 161, 163, but every now and then I got a 159, and that like just crushes them,
Right.
which I've had people like that before. And so those are the ones I'm like, let's just do 3 or 4 days out, even if it's a 159, get some recovery time. You're going to be fine. Like if you just bring your A game and you feel good, you will get a 160 because statistically you've been getting them way more than you had that like 1 or 2 159s,
Yeah, I'm talking
So
about a person that
exactly right.
they're going to get 145 or 150 or whatever.
Then it's like, yeah.
What I'm trying to avoid is them going in the test with unrealistic expectations. Oh, I'm going to fly through this section, know everything. No, you're not. And when it
Yeah.
when it doesn't happen that way, you just keep going and do your best, not like start wallowing in the test, you know?
Right. I mean, so I mean, if there was a person that was getting 140, 145, 150, I mean, if they took a test 3 days out versus the night before and they got a 145 and all their tests were in that score band too, then it's like, I'm not really expecting a miracle then either, So yeah, you like you said, it is two totally different cases. In your case, yeah, I mean, I guess it wouldn't matter when they took that practice test. I personally, I'd still probably not do the day before just for brain freshness, I guess, if that's a thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, at that point, whether you take it,
I'm not saying they got to do it the night before. All I'm just saying is you don't want to be overconfident in your test,
no, not at all.
and then when things start going south, you bail.
Well, that's the other thing too, is like, which is kind of a different thing. It's like, let's say you are scoring. I mean, let's say you're averaging a 160. It doesn't matter, 165, right? But then, and usually you're pretty good at games. But then you get to your test, and you have one weird curveball game, and it's like, I know I didn't do well in that game. Like, I think one good thing I always tell people before the real test is like, listen, this may happen, and if it does, you cannot allow yourself to crumble based on that one little thing, right? Like personally, for me, on my real Lsat that I took, reading comp was already not my favorite section, and I got in there, I misbubbled half of it. I had to go back, that was horrible. But I had to go back, find the problem, fix it. It was section 2 of my test. I had to go back, find the problem, fix it. I did it, and it was fine. I finished with just enough time left, and that freaked me out. But I couldn't let it affect my section 3 and 4, which were both real LRs, and then my section 5, which was real games. I couldn't do that because if I did, I definitely wouldn't have scored as high, And so it's like, either way, I agree with you there. It's like, when someone's about to do their practice test, you really want to have that conversation of, well, what happens if something weird happens on your test, and how do you mentally and emotionally handle that,
Yeah. It's not just for the people that are not scoring well. It's for everybody.
No, it's for everyone. I mean, if you're scoring a 170 or 120, whatever it is, if you get a curveball, like that can freak anyone out, and you want to make sure you handle that with as much calm and poise as you can, so you don't let it ruin the rest of your test.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, man. Okay, cool. So that's the first round of questions. Let me go to the second round. How do I do this? Oh, we don't. Okay, perfect. Okay, so these are some good questions too. So this is kind of a dense one. So I'm gonna kind of see if I can. Well, I'll just read most of it if I can start summarizing it. Can you guys comment on any perceived changes in wording, language styles on the most recent LR sections, 85 and up? This person said the most recent June Flex language felt much more slippery and harder to grasp for some reason than the 70s. Blank, 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 blank. Do you guys see any language differences, trends in LR stims in the modern era? And if so, how does one get used to them? There's only a handful of modern era PT85 and up tests that are in circulation.
What do you think?
To be honest, I would say my default answer is no. I mean, I think every test has its own set of questions that can be weirdly worded, or even now this person asked about the stem a little bit more specifically, but I'm going to point out question stems, especially if you look at the older tests, which will bring back to the newer tests. If you look at the older tests, question types are generally the same, but they can be worded slightly differently. And it wouldn't shock me, and I have seen some examples on the newer tests where a question stem isn't as concretely worded as you would like. And it's like, I kind of have to interpret this a little bit. So I see some of that, but I don't find the LR problems, like the actual stimuli, to be any more weirdly worded than, or slipperily worded, or harder, more difficultly worded than, something like in the 70s necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, did you see that video I did about the scariest new LSAT things?
Yeah,
And
and you were like, there is none, or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
uh, and then they brought out the flex like a couple days later or something, and I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
Well, flex, it's still sort of the same, but that's the biggest change, of course, I think, because the LR went down so significantly in importance, and the other things went up. But no, but I mean, basically my default answer is like, the LSAT's the LSAT, be prepared for everything. Even if there was some kind of pattern on the 80s so far, they could change it next test. So
That's
it
true.
doesn't matter what, I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's basically a waste of time to try to assess the differences. Just try to learn everything you can from each test and from each question. Um, are there some differences? Maybe. I don't know. A lot of people are talking about how reading comp is harder now. I don't know. I didn't really notice it. Um, I mean, a lot of people were talking about how, they don't do circle games and logic games, and then there was a circle game. And so any pattern that there exists can be broken. And to me, they're usually just doing the same things. I mean,
Right.
sometimes they stop doing main conclusion questions for a while. There's not many main conclusion questions or whatever LR questions. Maybe they change the distribution, or they start doing flaws a lot more heavily for a couple tests in a row or something like that. But then there's always changes,
Yeah.
and so I wouldn't really worry about that stuff too much. But I would just in general, to capture any patterns that do exist, I'd use the older tests first and do the more recent stuff later, so
Sure.
that, and when you are sort of know what you're doing, you can sort of modify, you can learn what you're doing without wasting the newer stuff, and
Yes.
you can sort of uh, tweak what you're doing if you do notice consciously or subconsciously anything different about the newer
Yeah.
tests. And you would probably notice it subconsciously because there's so much to analyze that I don't even know if you could find patterns if you tried. I mean, it would be a big project. And I think most people who talk about that they see different things are just talking, but I don't think there's much behind it. I think that to really verify whether things are new or not would be a very big data analysis project. And
Sure. Yeah.
I think that you could do it without getting a team of people together, basically, or devoting your life to it, or a year or something.
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
but your subconscious might pick up on it. So, I don't know.
Right. I mean, I think one important part, that's in this question, is that this person said the most recent June Flex's LR wording was much more slippery and harder to grasp. And my immediate thought to that is, maybe, and we don't know because it's not disclosed and we didn't take it, but it's also equally possible that your heightened sense of awareness and your heightened test anxiety perhaps made it seem more slippery. Whereas if you sat down and took it back as a PT now, you would not even notice anything different, right? Very possible that could just be a mental thing.
Probably not equally likely. Probably that's much more likely.
It probably is much more likely. I hear that a lot. I mean, every single test since I've been tutoring it, people will say, ooh, like the reading comp was tough, or they had this special thing in the games like we've never seen this before. And it's like, well, we have. It's just that, this is your test and you were kind of already heightened and that kind of thing. And so which is understandable. I mean, I was the same way on my test. I mean, it's not a bad thing. But that's kind of the phenomenon I think I see happening a lot. I like what you said about the older tests too. A lot of times I'll start with the older tests, of course, and then go back to the recents like most people do. But then every now and then, even if someone's PTing like in the PT, or they're using like the practice test in the 70s or the 80s, I'll say, let's go back and do like practice test number 3. And let's just look at some of these LR question stems and see how they're kind of worded slightly differently. And like, if you get that on your test, would you be confident to interpret that as like a strengthened question? Would you be able to see like, this is actually, it must be true, just kind of in disguise, It's a cool little exercise I do sometimes, but overall, yeah, I think you can see patterns. I like the not to call anyone out, but I like the companies that do try to do like predictions of like what's going to the test, and they always say like, oh, there's going to be some flaw questions, and you'll probably see one or two parallel reasons. And I'm like, yeah, like literally every single test ever has had the exact same thing. So like, yeah, no wonder. Yeah, but the point is, it's a very predictable test. If there was a change in some sort of language, or if there was some brand new game, they're going to have to introduce it eventually. But in terms of change of language, I feel like that would be done gradually over time, and not this sudden, like every single LR problem is going to look a lot more difficult and more challenging. Or if it was, you would have seen that on experimentals. And I haven't heard anything of that recently. So I'm not sure that, I guess the short answer, I'm not sure there really is any trends. It seems like the 80s are not really any different besides, that one circular game on the November test. That's all I really know about. That's super, super out of the blue. But to be honest, even the prep test in the 70s, PT 72, 77, and 79 all have pattern games, or loose sequencing, which is not even common anymore. And so even those would be considered out of the blue. And so like it's expected that every now and then you're gonna get an LSAT that just has one tiny different logic game or different little thing. And it's like, going back to our conversation earlier, it's like, if you might get that curveball, I can't guarantee you won't. If you do, just how do you handle it?
Yeah. And
So
you could pretty much, for some students, you can pretty much guarantee that you will, because unless you've studied for hundreds of hours,
well, right.
you're going to encounter stuff that you've never seen or you're not that familiar with. So you're going to get a curveball, and you have to, learn as best you can a system that allows you to deal with any new things the same as you would deal with any familiar thing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's like, and I haven't given this a lot of thought, but it comes to mind every now and then where, like, in the beginning, you do, you want to try to, or a lot of people, when they try to teach a test, will try to do it very mechanically, and like, this works because it's very formulaic, and just this plus this equals this, and that kind of thing. It's just great. But it's also like, I really want you, which there was a lively debate one time about this, like, you want to learn it mechanically, but also conceptually, like, you want to know, like, to use the example of indicator words and that kind of thing. You want to understand that you can understand mechanically, and like, this is an indicator word, what comes after it is this, but also like, can you just like understand it conceptually? So if I see that and I'm kind of freaking out, like, can I just interpret it without having to rely on those mechanics, especially if you get a curveball?
Yep.
So yeah. Okay, so that's the answers to that question. This is kind of a loose question. I'm not sure how much we can answer this, but for those who cannot cover 100% of all the questions due to timing issues, and we can say your test is tomorrow, then for the sake of the question, what tactics would you recommend for different sections? Actually, I'm sure they're coming at from it as like, right now I can't finish all the timing in the section, all the questions in the section. What do I do to get faster, basically?
Can you read it? I didn't really catch
Yeah.
it.
So the question is, for those who cannot cover 100% of all the questions due to timing issues, especially for those whose primary language is not English, what tactics would you recommend for different sections?
Oh, well, I'd recommend the same tactic for each section. I mean, maybe there's different things for different sections too, but one thing that you can do is don't speed through it. Just do what you can.
Yep.
Because if you speed through it, there's literally answers there waiting for you to speed through it. And they're going to seem like they're right if you read through it quickly. And so you might do worse than just guessing.
Very true.
If you don't really know what the passage said in LR, but you sort of know, you might pick an answer. You might pick the right answer less than 20% of the time, whereas if you just guess, you'd be 20% of the time.
Yes, statistically, yeah.
Also, for the different sections, they're all sort of like this. The earlier questions are easier, so that's another reason you don't want to speed through to get to the harder ones, because it doesn't matter how much time you spend on those, you're probably gonna get those wrong if you are not able. I mean, you might get them right. Maybe a person really just has to go slow, but still is very good. I guess that could be possible. I've never really seen that, but maybe all the questions are the same difficulty for you because you're an expert, but you for some reason can't go fast. Then I guess this wouldn't apply, but for everybody I've ever seen, if they can't go fast enough, that's because they don't know enough about what they're doing. And so if you speed through the ones that you could get right, which are the first ones, just to get to the other ones, so you have enough time to do those, you're still going to get them wrong because you don't know what you're doing. And so now you're getting everything wrong, as opposed to the early ones that you could have gotten right. And then you would have just stopped and guessed on the rest. And that would be best for you, probably.
Yeah. I mean, I think it can sometimes be a difficult conversation to have, because the problem will be like, okay, well, I can either get, through all 25 questions and do okay. And my responsibility will always be like, well, yes, you will do okay. But like you just said, if you would actually slow down and do less questions, you might mathematically actually come out more accurate than you would if you didn't do all the questions, which I 100% agree with. But then the common response is, well, I want to be able to do all of them and get them right. And it's like, I also want you to be able to do that. That might take time. Like it may not happen tomorrow. It's going to take you continuously practicing and honing your skills so that the skills come more quickly to you and you become better at it, and thereby you become faster at it. It's totally possible, but it's not something you can fix in like 3 days, that's kind of a more long-term goal. But yes, like, I'm not sure, like you said, I'm not sure if there's different methods for the different sections in getting them faster. I agree with you. I would totally not try to rush on any of the sessions, especially reading comp, where everyone wants to rush through reading comp and it just kills them, man. It's so bad. That's when I find that people want to rush through all the time. But all the sections you don't want to rush through. And then if you will keep practicing and keep staying as accurate as possible on the ones you attempt, like I want people to get -0 on the ones they do. And if you can do that, then you can start doing more questions. You can start pushing yourself. But if you can stay accurate on the ones you get attempt and you keep doing that over and over and over again, assuming you have good strategies, then you will eventually get faster. A lot of times it takes a few weeks and then you're faster and then it's all good. Which goes into a separate conversation, which we don't have to get into, but which I observe is a lot, having faith in a certain way of teaching or learning the LSAT. I see a lot of times people will just like try something for like a week and like, this isn't working, so I'm going to switch. And it's like, it's probably going to take you a little bit more than a week to kind of latch on to anything a lot of times, but in general, yeah, take it slow and steady. Don't rush. Keep getting the ones you attempt right, and then that speed will come eventually. You can try doing, little timing drills where you actually try to actively push yourself a little bit faster every now and then, kind of setting new timing records. But all this just comes over time.
Yeah. Brings up a point in my mind that I recently noticed more and more, is that when I'm working with a student and how much do they improve over the time I work with them? The number one factor seems to be not how much homework they do outside of sessions,
Sure.
not how much time they have total to study, not how smart they are or whatever, I don't know.
Right.
The initial score is, but how closely are they trying to do what I'm telling them to do? Am I telling them to do X and then they literally do the opposite every time?
It happens so much. I don't understand. Like
Yeah.
literally, I don't get it. Yeah, I share, and I'm not sure if it's a frustration for you, but it's a frustration for me. Where I tell someone to do something.
I'm frustrated about it, but I see over and with enough experience, I see that like the people I literally tell you to do this, then every session you tell me you didn't do it. Okay.
Well, it's like you're not going to make progress.
But the people that I see that really are making progress steadily are doing what I tell them to do. Instead, sometimes even those people, then they'll do an assignment, and I'll be like, okay, why did this one go slow? Oh, I did this. Oh, okay, so you did nothing like what I told you to do. Okay. All right. So remember that you do that stuff. So anyway, that's I don't know what the initial question was, but it's just something I noticed that like if you want to do well, like find something that has worked for like not only a lot of people, because totals can be deceptive. Like if you have 1 million people do Power Score or whatever, Kaplan or whatever, you're gonna have people succeed. They're the people that would have succeeded no matter what they did. you're going to have a lot of those people. But that's not really that relevant unless you are one of those people. If you're not one of those people who's going to do well no matter what, which if you're looking for tutoring or having struggles on the outset and watching this video or whatever, you're probably not one of those people that's going to do well no matter what they do, then you need to look at programs and resources that work for a high percentage of the people that use them, not for a high total of the people that use them. I mean,
True. Yes. No, and I mean, I would agree with that. Yeah, because I mean, if you have a million people do this program, obviously some of them are going to be successful. Like, but it's all about the proportion, you know, which is, that's a really good point. But yeah, it's just like if you are, because here's the thing, some tutors, you know, maybe even me, you included, might give advice that seems contrary to what the common, not common sense, what the maybe common tactic is out there, right? Like you might, I don't know, I mean, there's a million examples, but I think what happens is that you might give someone a piece of advice and they read like one Reddit post where someone says the opposite and they got a 170, they don't listen to you. And it's like, I feel like, and you can agree with me on this, I think it's like if you're giving someone advice, it's usually because you think that way is going to work best for them. And so it's like, yes, I know, I realize other people do X, Y, and Z method and it works, but because I've experienced teaching this test, I noticed that with you, the way you learn, I don't believe that would be best for you. And so I'm telling you to do this. I really think this will work for you. And then they don't listen. And it's like, okay, well then I don't know what to do, you know? It's always frustrating. I mean, it's, this sounds mean. It's their test, not mine, but I don't want them to do bad, you know? So it's like, I want you to make progress and do well. And so it's not like I'm not mad about it, but you know, it's like, I want you to do well. And so like, I would recommend doing what I recommend, because I really think it's going to help you, you know?
Sure, sure. Oh, I had that come up. So we had a talk the other day, or I don't know if it was the last one or whatever, but I said on the talk that I studied like 12 hours a day.
I remember that. Yeah.
And my students, who I have been telling, don't do that, you know, and
Yep.
they were like, Troy, you study 12 hours a day. What the hell? Am I doing enough? I heard, so it was like the person that got a 170, but it was me. And then they were coming to me telling me, hey, but Troy got a 170 and studied 12 hours a day. Are you sure that I'm doing enough? And, I was like, yes, that is. And I had to explain, well, I got a 170 without me tutoring them. So I had to sort of figure out a lot of stuff that I'm sort of spoon feeding you. So it took a lot longer. Yeah. And so yeah, just an example of somebody getting a 170 or whatever. I got a 171 and doing a certain way, but that's not necessarily.
No, I literally never recommend. I've never recommended once people study the way I studied for the test, because it just like I got lucky. I had no information going in. It just happened to work, you know. And just summary is, you know, I did nothing but reading books on it for like 3 months, and I just did like on-time PTs basically the whole time, and I never did a full-length PT, and like that worked for me. It's great. I have not found it to work for literally anyone else. I don't recommend it. It was definitely unconventional, and I don't think it would work for the majority of people, so I don't recommend it. But I do really try to take the individual into account and say, well, what do you need for this? And try to make a study plan for that, you know, or just try to like I may tell one student to do something and tell another student to do not the total opposite, but something different, because they are two different people and they learn two different ways, you know? So just stuff like that, you know? I'm not sure how we got into that topic, but there's, if you're paying someone to give you advice on Lsat, I would listen to them is the ultimate conclusion. So yes. All right. So then we can go on. This is definitely a great, we had a question kind of related to this, semi-related to this last time, but it's a little bit more specific on this one. I'd love to see you guys do a topic on myths and facts relating to learning disabilities and how if you choose to not use your accommodations, so you're not using your accommodations, it can have an impact on the exams. This goes on to say, helping to dispel any stigma associated with LDs, learning disabilities, begins by acknowledging being intelligent and having learning disabilities aren't mutually exclusive. Some tutors on here can be ableist and they don't realize it. Psychology is a great way to break into the topic. So I guess the main question is myths and facts relating to learning disabilities. and how using your accommodations or not can have impacts on the exam.
You want to start?
Yeah, I mean, my first initial thought is, well, I have two thoughts. One, if you have accommodations to the test, I would use them because I can't think of a reason not to use them. No one has to know you use them. Well, actually, that's not entirely true, and I'll elaborate. But most of the time, I would use them. No one has to know you use them. The law schools don't get to see it, so it's not going to matter. And for 99% of the people, it's only going to help you increase your score. The only time I haven't found it to be the case is where someone gets, double time, and it turns out that actually wears them out more than it helps. And I might say, okay, well, maybe you can actually go back and say, I only want time and a half or something, right? But for a lot of people, if they get extra time on the test or they need to do a paper test or whatever it is, it's usually for a good reason, and I would definitely do that. Some people feel like if they have accommodations, they are less than other people because they did the test in 53 instead of 35, and it's like, you're not less than. It's fine. It's going to help you get it. It makes the playing field level, and it helps you get a good score, helps you achieve. So why would you not do it? And so that's my immediate thought. I've had many students with learning disabilities, and they do fine. So I don't think having a learning disability is an immediate impediment to you doing well on the test.
Well, I guess it would be if there was not accommodations.
Well,
Because
yeah. I mean, if it was all 35 minutes and someone, had a reading disability, for instance, or a vision impairment, that could definitely impede you. But, if you introduce accommodations to help equalize it, then I've had many people in that circumstance with the accommodations do well on the test.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So tutoring different people, it's very clear that some people need more time and need to go slower through the thought processes so they do it properly.
Yes.
So if you have accommodations, I guess potentially you could have gotten it some kind of illegitimate way, but you probably got it because you need it to score as well as another person who doesn't would score putting in the same amount of
Sure.
study. So you do need it probably to get whatever score with putting in the same amount of effort. I guess if you put in a lot more effort, you could, even without accommodations, you put a lot more effort than somebody, you could do better than them on the same test with
Yeah.
same.
There's other factors. Yeah.
But basically, you need it now. So there's this. So there's basically. I mean, you do need it? So most likely. So do you want a lower score? If you want a lower score, you cannot use it unless maybe for some people maybe they studied so long that they really changed their brain or how they think, and now getting double time would extend the time of the test so much that they might get tired versus
right, which is
but in general, it's going to make your score go higher if you have extra time. Even if you don't use it, you could just relax for a couple 10 minutes or something, and maybe that's what you need. Maybe that's why you need accommodations, because you need time down or something, whatever.
yeah.
So the choice is pretty clear if you want to maximize your score, but I guess some people might feel bad about doing that. Like, well,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
am I cheating? Am I whatever? Am I really, something like that? I don't know exactly. I'm not an expert in this topic. I've taught people with learning disabilities. I'm tutoring people right now with learning disabilities.
Exactly.
But that's a separate issue. Do I feel bad that this is the reality? And I don't know what the best answer to that is. I would say that, number one, I mean, you only get one reality in life. Some people get their legs cut off. Some people have learning disabilities. Some people get coronavirus and have their lungs permanently scarred for the rest of their life. I mean, you got what you got. And you can, if you want, live the rest of your life feeling bad about it, or you could not. And it's not that simple, obviously.
It's not, yeah,
Maybe
right, but I see what you're saying.
you don't really have a choice, maybe, or maybe you need to go to, or maybe you need to get help with your feelings, like, therapy or something like that, and develop the ability to make that choice, to feel good about what is. Or maybe you don't want to feel good about what is, but that's fine. I guess if you want to be upset about it or feeling less than constantly, you can. That's maybe there's some good in that. I don't know, um, but most people, I would say, they would be like, okay, I don't want to feel bad about what I have to deal with, and the cards I'm dealt or whatever, because you don't have a learning disability because you did something. I'm pretty sure
No.
it's because something was done to you or something was not done to you, or for you. And so, or maybe just it's just genetics or something, I don't know. But but anyway, I would say, yeah, that there's two parts, and the first part is pretty simple. That, like, now you probably needed to get the highest score as you can, and you should probably go for that. And you probably know you want to go for that. And then there's the second part of, like, well, what does that mean about me, and how should I feel about that and this stuff. And I'm not an expert on that, but those gave you some thoughts on that, and maybe do some reading about that. There's people that are experts about these things. Read what they have to say about it. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, and it's like, I mean, because here's the deal. I mean, and again, I'm not an expert at this at all, but I feel like, first off, I mean, like you said, you are kind of given the cards you're dealt with, and there's nothing you can really do about that. You can't change whether or not, I think in most cases, again, I don't know, but I feel like in most cases you can't change whether or not you have a learning disability. And so it's like, we can't change that fact. That's there. But now that it is there, why would you not do something that makes your future better or brighter, which you can do with accommodations. Now, like you said, maybe some people want to feel bad about it or be upset about it, and they choose to do that, and I guess that's fine. But I think the majority of people, once you kind of talk it out with them, they're like, okay, well, this is fine. It is fair. I want to make sure I get as good a score as possible. And that's the thing. And I mean, now you may know this more than I do, because you practiced a little bit. But okay, let's say let's say you, like, it's not like you're cheating your entire life. It's just the LSAT. As far as I know, I don't think law school really gives you a whole lot of accommodations. And if so, I can't imagine the lawyer field does. I mean, maybe to a certain extent, but it's not as, like,
Well,
clear cut, Do you see what I'm saying?
yeah. I think what you're saying is you can't actually expect to have accommodations in law school and the legal profession. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, a little bit. And so then, like, for me, it's like, because, like, I guess what I'm saying is, if someone could have accommodations all throughout the LSAT, then law school, then the legal profession, and all this kind of stuff, then that becomes a different discussion, because a lot of people could take advantage of that system. But as far as I know, and you can correct me, but as far as I know, it's just the LSAT. And so even if someone cheated the system to get a good score on the LSAT, they're still going to be leveled out or equalized and have their true colors shown once they get into law school and then the legal field, because there's not as many accommodations. Does that make sense?
Okay, so I want to go a little bit slower on this part because, all right, so number one, I do think, well, are you talking about only accommodations for learning disabilities?
I kind of went off on two different topics. I'm talking, I kind of got it. I started learning disabilities, but I started thinking about how people will take advantage of the system a lot too.
I've never seen really anybody take advantage of the system. But I'm sure some people do, maybe.
100% they do.
Mostly what I've seen is people who need accommodations getting accommodations.
Yes.
In terms of meaning like there's a significant difference between what I can teach and how quickly I can teach somebody without a learning disability and with a learning disability, something like that. And so whether or not there should be accommodations or whatever, it doesn't, I mean, whatever, that's a legitimate point to discuss. But the point is that these are real cognitive issues that people are dealing with. And that's why they're getting accommodations for the most part, I think.
Yes.
And so now the next question is, Okay, so for somebody, I wouldn't really look at it from the perspective of like a person without it saying like being like bitter about, I mean, you could look at it from this perspective, like, well, what about that person who got into law school? Like, that's not fair to me, you know? I would look at it more from the person that has the cognitive disability or whatever it's called, you know, learning disability. Yeah. So like it's cognitive disability, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it could be visual or something like that.
Yeah, it can be visual sometimes.
It's only learning disability, I guess,
Physical.
in the sense that it impacts your cognition. So anyway, I would look at it from that person's perspective. If that person person might be wondering, if I get accommodations in the LSAT, am I going to do well and then be totally in the deep end,
Mm-hmm.
out of my comfort zone and out of my, you know, in law school or in the legal profession? And I don't think so, because I think there are accommodations in law school. I'm not an expert on that, but I think you can, if you have a documented learning disability, I imagine most law schools would work with you, giving you extra time, whatever, on tests, accommodating physical disabilities, different things, visual disabilities, stuff like this. It might be illegal for them not to. I'm not sure.
I don't know either. That's the thing.
Yeah. And then in terms of as in the legal profession, well, possibly some lawyers and some professional uh, opportunities would not accommodate you. Possibly,
Sure.
maybe you could get accommodations. That's the other thing. People always like well, can I get accommodations like on, well, do average people get accommodated? Well, you don't have to be average. So you might be able to make something work where most people don't make it work. So it's not necessarily a closed door just because other people aren't making it work. But also, there's a lot of different variety of positions in the legal system, and not all of them require like super fast thinking on a test or something like that. You know, most of them probably don't. And, you know, in terms of, you know, scheduling a trial or whatever, I mean, you know, maybe it's up to the judge to schedule it, you know, usually or something like that. So, you know, you could just tell the judge, hey, judge, I need some more time for this. I have, you know, a learning disability or whatever. I need time to read all this stuff that I have to read. And the judge might be like, okay, cool, take 2 weeks, you know. So I wouldn't say that it's as bleak as you might think.
Sure.
I think that, you know, especially a person who's skilled at advocating for themselves, can, like a person who maybe studies for the LSAT and gets very good at verbal communication, they could create opportunities and accommodations where none exist. And I think there's a lot of accommodations that do exist.
Yeah. I guess I was brainstorming or thinking of like the two scenarios where one might feel guilty about having accommodated, like feeling like they're um not changes, but they feel like, you know, they have it easier than other people. Because I mean, like I think you may have
If you
experienced too, or
have a learning disability, you do not have it easier. You
no,
have it
but I
harder.
know. I mean, but some people may think that, and like they come to me like, well, Brad, I mean,
Well,
like,
that's why I'm saying it, because
right, yeah,
you should know that you don't have it easy. You
exactly. That's
might
what, yeah.
not even have it equal. You probably have it harder, even though you have accommodations.
That's what I was trying to get to. It's like even in, like if you feel guilty, I mean, like it's fine because I guess there's other things that could be done in law school. Either way, it could be done in law school or legal profession that are also accommodating that. I guess the other question I want to ask too, um, and it's not really dicey territory, but it's interesting. And again, I don't know because I've never been a lawyer. Do you feel like, because you brought the example like, well, hey judge, I need more time to do X, Y, and Z because of my learning disability, right? Do you feel that some people would say, okay, well, hold on, time is money, and if you can't do in this amount of time, I'm gonna get someone else? And how does, I mean, that's definitely being kind of ableist, I guess. But I mean, do you have any experience with that, like in the field at all, or anything like that, or is that not even a concern?
Well, I don't have a lot of experience with it, so I don't. So I'm not. Whatever I say might be wrong, but
That's
um,
okay.
but I think that so time is money, and yeah, and so but you know, okay, maybe your accommodation is you only bill the client for 10 hours, even though it took you 20. Maybe that's your accommodation. Maybe the firm eats the cost, or you and the firm
Or
eat
you
the
eat
cost,
the cost. Yeah,
whatever. But maybe that's your accommodation. Okay, so the client usually doesn't need it done.
that quickly.
I mean, sometimes they do, and maybe sometimes you have to say, well, I can't get it done that quickly, or whatever. It's, try to use somebody else. I'm sorry. You tell your client or
Right.
whatever boss, like, I can't do it, whatever. I don't know, but
Yeah.
but um, yeah, I mean, it would be good. Oh, I think the person that asked it possibly, I think I suggested to them that maybe we talk to some people that actually are lawyers or know about more about this, and maybe
Sure.
they or me or them, all of us, whatever, could have a conversation about it. I don't know, but yeah. So I mean, I'm sure that there's some people that would say, whoa, I need it now, but oftentimes uh, a skilled advocate, self-advocate, could say, do you really need it now? Or could you wait a week?
Right. Exactly.
I know you might get a lawyer that can do it now, but I'll do it really well for you, but it'll be done next week. Do you think
Right.
you could wait a week? What will happen if you don't wait a week?
Just being an
So,
advocate.
so yeah, even in those situations, I think that
It's a good solution.
you can
Yeah.
change people if you are skilled at
I love it.
communication or another language communication if they speak another language. Um, so another reason I think to get very good at the LSAT so that you can convince people to accommodate you and all your desires in life.
Persuasive. Yeah. I know exactly. It's a really good discussion. I'm sure neither of us are total experts, so I think there's a lot more probably going on than we know. But yes, I agree with you. And I think the bottom line is 100%. If you feel like first off, you have learning disability, then you absolutely yes. But even if you feel like I need extra time, or if you feel like you need accommodations for any reason at all, you should absolutely get them. It is only there to help you and not hurt you anyway. And so, yes, I would never tell someone not to get accommodations unless I knew that they were just like, unless I thought, like we said earlier, getting double time would actually hurt them because of the length of the test then. But if you have a learning disability, then like we said, you need those. You probably need those. You need the minutes, and so yeah, you should totally get them. And if anyone tries to tell you that you shouldn't and it's unfair, I would say that's stupid and don't listen to them. To a degree, so yes, good. Yeah, really good, really dense topic there. All right, well, there's two more that aren't as dense at all. So there's how should you? This is a good question. I don't think we've maybe not have covered this. How should you study if you're thinking about retaking the LSAT but have completed most of the PTs and reviewed them?
Yeah, that's something that I worry about with people who are self-studying.
Yeah,
It's not a huge concern unless you go really extreme and you do all the PTs like 5 times, you know, and you still really don't know what you're doing because you're not studying properly.
sure.
Um, but if you do all the PTs one time, I mean, you're not going to remember
No,
everything.
you're
So,
not.
so, so that's okay. But yeah, I mean, I have exercises that I have students do before they do real questions, stuff that I write and stuff
Yep.
like that, so that they're not burning through real questions like so quickly. But I think the question was, what happens if you already did that,
You
right?
already did them and you've done them and you've now they didn't say how many times they've done them, but they said what do you do if you've taken them and you've reviewed all of them. Um, I guess the answer would be just to redo some of them.
Well, yeah, and you can also you might have reviewed them, but if I bet if you decided that was a good idea to take all the tests, you probably did that because you weren't learning enough from each question. And so your review was probably inadequate or could be better, let's say. And so either you can figure out how to review it better yourself, or you can get some help um, uh, so that you can actually learn more from each question rather than just burning through them a second or third time
Yeah.
without really actually learning what you're going to do next time.
Right.
questions wrong.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, like even if I did all the tests once and reviewed them, there's a lot you're probably like. There's no way you remember all those LR questions. Like, there's just no way. And so, and I even tell people like, listen, I guess if you do remember it, then fine, go to the next level and be able to explain. Okay, what's the stimulus thing in your own words? Why is the right answer right? Like, tutor me the question, you know? Because if you can't do that, then there's still stuff to learn about it, you know? And so, you would have to do a lot to really expend all these resources. And so I think redoing them is fine. If you like you memorize some, just go back and kind of explain them out loud, makes you understand it, and that's fine, you know. But also, if you are just starting to start, if you're listening to this and you haven't started studying yet, don't do all the PTs. Not like that, at least. You can do all of them eventually, but use them wisely. You only get a certain amount, and so I definitely didn't get through all the PTs before my test. I studied for 8 months. I still didn't get through all of them. And so I didn't try to either, but yes.
This is
Cool.
Tundra.
Hi, Tundra. Oh.
She just woke up from her nap.
Oh. Awesome. Does she like the LSAT? Does she know anything about the LSAT yet?
Do you know anything about the LSAT?
Yeah.
What do you know about the LSAT? Oh, it's what we do to get money.
I love it. There you go. It's not wrong.
So she always like, why do you have to do a session? I said, well, you see that food in the fridge? What's going to happen when you eat it all? And we go through it. So now she knows.
Oh, there you go.
Money.
I love it. All right. Well, there's only one more question. And it's not a dense one. Which prep tests do you recommend practicing for each section? Examples: logic games 50s present. Are there games at 30? Are the logic games below 30 a bad representation? They said obviously the more recent the better. But are old tests basically worth it?
Yeah, definitely. Old tests are worth it.
Yeah.
They might be better because they could help you prepare for stuff that is a little bit, well, like you were saying, like a little bit weird or whatever, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you find that there are like, I should only do logic games from PT 30 up, or is it just like all the tests are valid all the way, or?
I mean, if you have only a month left, I would probably focus on the 80s or the
Sure.
70s.
Right.
But if you have, 6 months, I would start with, I mean, you don't have to start with prep test one or,
Yeah.
but 40s now, 20s now, 10s now, 50s now.
I don't think it's a bad thing to do them, even if they are a little bit different or not representative. Like, they're good examples of curveballs. It's like, well, how are you going to handle that, you know? And so, yeah, if you are a month out, you definitely want to be doing more recent ones. But if you've got time and you want to, do prep test 14 or prep test 7, that's not a bad thing. And even
I mean,
if
I don't know if you should be doing more recent ones if you have a little bit of time. Maybe it'd be better to do older ones.
kind of depends on where you're at, I think, and where you're scoring.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they're sort of all the same. So I could sort of see myself recommending, like, I don't care, do whatever you want, or
Sure,
maybe
yeah.
it doesn't matter. But just to be on the safe side, in case there are any patterns that you might want to do the the newer ones if you have less time.
Exactly, yeah. So awesome,
But,
man. Well, that was it.
oh, one more thing. You might want to do the newer ones if you have less time, but if you're planning on taking it again, maybe not. Maybe
Ooh,
don't.
yeah, that's another good point. Like, are you planning to take it more than once? Because if so, you might want to do the 70s, but save those 80s for your second test if you know you're going to take it again. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
So
Cool.
cool, man. Well, good discussion. Anything else? Thoughts?
No, nothing else.
Awesome. Well, that answered everyone's questions. So we'll do it again sometime soon, of course.
Bye.
Bye, man. Bye, Tundra. Have a good one.